on the media side as well here pretty soon. We're going to fights. We're doing media coverage at PFL events, hopefully UFC events soon.
Awesome.
So that's a really cool thing we have going on too. And, yeah. And my NFT project. So I'm partnered with a couple other professional fighters. This sounds insane when I'm saying it out loud. It's a lot of things. But I'm coupled with a couple other professional fighters on this project. And we really wanted to create an NFT project that's for the fighters. There are a handful of NFT projects out there that use fighters and use their images, but they're not really profiting off of the product. And I was kind of disappointed to see that because of the UFC, like, obviously they do a lot for their fighters too, but like I've seen the cuts that, you know, the UFC fighters get from their memorabilia versus what the UFC makes off of them. And so it would just be really wanted to build something that gave fighters the opportunity to monetize their brand better, because it's a difficult industry to make money in. I think people either assume we make like nothing or we make like Conor McGregor money, and it is somewhere in between. But it's a very like it can be really difficult to find fights when you need them. It can be difficult to increase pay when you need it to, and so having different ways to provide passive income to fighters has been a passion of ours. And the art is so cool. Like we've got Johnny Eblin, we have Moicano, we've got Thiago Alves, we got Grant Dawson. We have a handful of high-level UFC fighters, and the art that we have of them is just unreal. And they'll also be getting, you know, they're going to get kickbacks from the project. They're going to have some of their own NFTs that they can sell or hold and use to invest as well. And we really want to, so eventually we are going to gamify. So there will be a game, which will be really sick. It'll be like Mortal Kombat meets the UFC game.
I'm surprised there hadn't been something like that already. Like that's the fact that you're saying that out loud. It didn't ever trigger in my brain. Why is there not anything like, you know, where you can have that dream fight of, you know, whoever versus whoever? Yeah, UFC does a good job with their game, but at the same time, like you could have like a Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter type game and have that. People would love that.
Oh, for sure. And that's the goal. That's the goal. If we can, like, I think it's a difficult thing to perfect, but we're definitely on the right path. And so we're looking to be able to bring that to fans, but also to bring live events and live experiences where people can connect with the fighters too.
Yeah. That's amazing that you're doing that. And I wholeheartedly agree that there needs to be more avenues that fighters can make money because, like you said, you know, people might see whatever the breakdown of how much everybody got paid for a certain event, but they're not doing the back math. They're not counting in the fact they got to pay taxes off that. They got to go pay the gym. They got to pay a manager. They might have to pay an accountant to even sort through all that money. Like by the time they get it back, like it is not as big as they imagine. So yeah, like you said, people think you're either making, It's
really about half. Like if you really most people's management teams take 10 to 20%. You know, most people, then you got to pay your nutritionist, your coaches. You have to cover your coach's travel costs, which you should. You know, they're coming with you, but you have to cover all of that. And people forget too, the UFC does not pay for medicals, and they pay for 2 flights. So they pay for you in one corner, and then there's 2 more corners that need to be flown out. There's, you know, your nutritionist that might need to be flown out. Any family that wants to come to the event, like those expenses are not covered.
So insane. Yeah, people don't do the backwards math when it comes to fighting and the whole game in general. And then there's some people that have like the entire gym comes, and we're like, how are you paying for all that? Like,
right. No, for sure. Like whenever, you know, like Islam has his like Abu Dhabi entourage.
Yeah.
47 people.
Or Izzy's got a big crew.
Yep. Charles.
Yeah, I was gonna say Charles was the other one I was thinking of. Like I remember watching his I think it's Undisputed or whatever. Anyway, that show. And I was like, holy shit, they got a whole like they got a floor of rooms they got to fill up now because there's so many people here. Like, you bring the entire country? This is crazy. I mean, good for you, but also good luck with paying that bill. Yeah.
Expensive life, but And you don't, it's such a short piece of your life too. Like people don't think about the fact that you live for 80 years. You only get to fight for like 15 if you're lucky.
Uh-huh. Yeah, not everybody is a Clay Guida or a Jim Miller where, you know, they're fighting forever. And, you know, there's some people that only, like, really look at how long did Brock Lesnar fight? Not very long. How long did Randy Couture fight? Not very long. How long did Chuck Liddell fight? Not very long. Like, if you really go back and look at how long these people actually fought, I mean, especially now, like, they would have even fought even shorter of a time because they probably would have had to fight more in that time frame. But, no, you're totally right. And a lot of the good ones will go on to be coaches. I mean, you're seeing it at America Top Team, and we're seeing it in other gyms as well. A lot of these fighters are creating their own gyms because they still want to give back to the sport and help the newer generation of talent that is coming up. And I think that's great. But there unfortunately is the other side where a lot of them, you know, especially the older veterans, they got paid even less back then. And unless it's sponsorship after the fact, or if they happen to have been good with their money, you know, a lot of them are just not having anything when it comes after the sport. I mean, we had the same situation with the NFL. There's so many NFL players that, you know, that's a short time for them as well because it's such a violent and physical sport that afterwards a lot of them are going to, you know, working at a car dealership or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but, you know, when you go from the highs to the highs of like being on the field every Sunday to, hey, do you want to go test drive this Miata? Like it's completely different. It's a shift. So it's, I'm so glad that you guys are actually trying to help fighters create more avenues for bringing in revenue like that.
Yeah, it's definitely a passion project of ours, and it's like I agree with you. There's nothing wrong with that life after sport, but man, like it's sad when you've sacrificed your body.
Yeah.
For which I don't want to say for the entertainment of others because like we love what we do. Like I have the coolest. Like don't get me wrong. This is not I'm sacrificing for the fans. No, like it's freaking awesome. But at the same time, like you do, like it is hard on your body. Like I've had 4 knee surgeries. I'm not even 29 yet, you know. So it's that. It would be very nice if we had more resources available to athletes so that they knew how to build wealth while they have access to it. Like stacking assets and teaching athletes how to stack assets while they're young and healthy instead of, which we've done this too, Grant and myself, like it's so easy to overspend when you go from living in like shitty little, you know, building to, and then you move and you get this influx of money and like, wow, I could buy a car that doesn't break down all the time. Like, and you should buy a $12,000 car that doesn't break down all the time, but it's so easy to buy a $35,000 car, you know? And I understand. Like, it's very easy to do, especially when you don't have the right people around you that are teaching you how to build wealth in a legal, healthy, long-term way.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the show, The Rock had a show on HBO called Ballers, where it was kind of like that. Yeah, it was like that, but for football players, where he was an ex-football player, didn't have any money, and now he's trying to help these younger kids, show them maybe don't go buy out all the cars, maybe don't have multiple homes, maybe you don't really need a boat. So, you know, like I do hope that there is more of that for fighters as well, because, you know, MMA is not getting any smaller. So there's going to be more big companies like that. There's going to be far more regionals, and there's going to be even further or more amateur fighters coming in. And as we're seeing, you know,
more competition, and that's where it gets dangerous for athletes because it's harder to keep your job. Like the NFL's like that. If you have a bad season, like you're gone.
Yeah,
like,
baseball same way.
And you can be the hardest worker, but if you can't execute, you're gone. And fighting's the same way. We just have the luxury of it not being quite as lucrative as football and not as competitive yet. But it's getting there. It
is. I mean, especially we're seeing with UFC being owned by Endeavor, and then Endeavor now merging with WWE. Like, that world is huge. And now that they're going to be a publicly traded company, they're going to actually have to really put out more as to where the money is going for UFC. And we saw when Endeavor did buy them, they made a lot of cuts. Like you had guys like Chuck Liddell and there was a couple others that were getting still a salary for being ambassadors. Well, as soon as Endeavor came in, they cut that out because they are like, why are we paying these guys just to exist on the planet? Like,
which, yeah, no, I agree. Like, I would have much rather Grant got that money, you know?
But we are going to, I mean, that's the thing is that when you get to the top of the top like that, you know, some of the money is got to be cut out or it's got to go somewhere else so that you can have, you know, guys that are just coming in the UFC to make their name. And if they don't win a couple fights, well, get the next guy. Because, like you said, they're so big. And every weekend there's a different fight card. So that's, let's say there's 10 fights on every card. That's 40 fights. That is 80 fighters, like, plus teams. Like, that's a lot of money to be having to pay. And that's also, like you said, more competition because the sport is not getting smaller. We're having kids do it, and they're learning more about MMA before they're 13 than most people did after they were 25.
And I think, too, that there's something different about MMA that's different from most other sports, and that's that the more successful you are in the sport, the harder it is to keep your job. Now, obviously, there's exceptions to the rule. Like Conor McGregor can lose another 3 fights and not get cut because he's a superstar. But the guys who are making big money, who aren't superstars, if they lose 1, 2 in a row, they're gone because now they're a liability. The UFC has to pay them 5 times more than they have to pay, you know, Joe Blow from Nebraska, who will fight for 12 and 12.
Yeah. It is. I love talking about the breakdown of the fighting pay because it is so lopsided. I'm thankful to talk about it now because I feel like in the next 5 years it'll be a completely different conversation, and I really hope it does lean more toward the equal side, if not more toward the fighter side.
I understand, though. It has its pros, and hear me out.
Right.
It has its pros that it is the way it is. It is so much easier to get into the UFC than it is to get into the NBA or the NFL. And it's because it's not as lucrative. Because when you get signed to the UFC on a short notice fight to fill in for somebody else, it doesn't change your life financially. Like you go from $0 to, you know, if you're really lucky, $24,000, which is not a lot of money, you know. But if you take a short notice against a really tough guy up a weight class, you're probably going home with $12,000 or $15,000, you know. And half of that goes other places, you know, goes to pay your coaches and your gym and your management team. And so it is a lot easier, and it is a lot easier to keep your job too. Like if entry level guys were making 400, 600K in the UFC, you lose 1 fight, you're gone. Because all of a sudden it's just as competitive as the NFL and everybody wants to do it because it's so much more lucrative, you know? And then we have a lot more wrestlers coming over because there's not a lot of money in Worlds or in the Olympics unless you were like Kyle Dake. Like there's a handful of guys, you know, but at the end of the day, like those guys, I can make 600K wrestle fucking these guys, you know, like, excuse my French, but like you can, you know, if you can do that, then why not? Why would you not do that? You know? And so it has its pros. I definitely think a union is the only way, like the fighters are going to end up with health benefits and things like that. But it does get messier. I will say that. Like, yes, it would be very helpful to the fighters, and I don't think it would be a bad thing, but it definitely does get messier when you start involving unions.
Very true. Yeah, we see that in so many other fields. I mean, look at how many times hockey, baseball, they went on strike. Like, you know, NBA had a lockdown for a little bit. Like, I've heard about this fighter union idea. I'm not going to name names as to who it was, but he is in the UFC Hall of Fame, and it was about 15 years ago when I was around him and he was talking about it, and I was like,